This presentation on the Verdura Plantation is a production of the Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation. It was originally presented as a webinar in the fall of 2024. This presentation is built upon the foundational work of Sharyn Heiland Shields. Her connection to the Verdura Plantation began in 1965 when she and her friends stumbled upon its ruins while exploring. Over 30 years after first discovering the site, she returned to academia to study anthropology, culminating in a 2001 master's thesis that wove together an archaeological survey of the land with a detailed history of the Shields family. She later expanded this research into her 2016 book, Whispers from Verdura. This presentation is a direct result of her tireless effort and passion. We will begin by answering the fundamental question: what was the Verdura Plantation? We will start with an exploration of the house itself, detailing the ruins that stand today and the grand plantation home it once was. From there, we will delve into the history of its founder, Benjamin Shields, the ambitious empire builder who established Verdura as the intended ancestral home for his family. Our journey will then track the fate of his vast assets after his death and examine the devastating effects of the economic downturn following the Civil War. Finally, we will uncover how, before being left to the elements, the estate was rocked by a family scandal that served as a final blow to Benjamin Shields' legacy. The ruins of Verdura stand as they do today due to a long history of abandonment and decay following the mansion's destruction by fire in the 1880s. The first image, captured by Sharyn Heiland Shields for her 2016 book, shows the site in winter, while the second, taken by photographer David Bullitt for Abandoned Florida in 2023, reveals its summer state. A comparison of these photos taken 7 years apart shows increased neglect, marked by significantly more vegetative growth encroaching on the site. The towering columns themselves represent the most substantial remains of the original mansion, as little else survived the fire. Aside from some scattered masonry on the ground and bricks from the kitchen structure, they are all that is left. Ultimately, the loss of this grand house physically marked the ending of the Shields family's era at Verdura. When it was constructed in the 1830s, Verdura was, by all accounts, a beautiful and imposing house. This, the only known drawing of the estate, shows a grand brick mansion believed to have been whitewashed, with green trim and shutters. It was happily situated atop a hill, overlooking a creek that ran along the bottom of the property, and was surrounded by very fine, well-manicured lawns, rose gardens, and a paved drive. The grounds functioned as a self-sufficient community, featuring a detached kitchen, barns, a stable, a blacksmith shop, a cotton gin, cisterns, and a family cemetery. It also, soberingly, contained slave quarters and a slave cemetery, the latter's precise location now lost to history. This drawing of the property is an invaluable resource, as no other photographs or contemporary illustrations of the house are known to exist. Much of our understanding of Verdura's layout comes from such family stories, which Sharyn Heiland Shields meticulously collected and combined with her archaeological research for her 2001 thesis. She interviewed several great and great-great-grandchildren of the original owners for their recollections. This specific map was drawn by descendant Henry Shields in 1999 based on his memory of a visit to the ruins with his grandfather in 1934. Sharyn's professional survey of the land and its remaining structures confirmed that the overall outline and placement of buildings were generally an accurate depiction of the property. The house at Verdura was constructed in the antebellum Greek Revival style, an architectural choice deeply symbolic of the era's complex ideals. Southern plantation owners adopted this style to express classical notions of democracy, order, and permanence, constructing homes reminiscent of ancient Greek temples to emphasize their wealth and status. This was more than mere aesthetics, it was a powerful bid for cultural legitimacy, aiming to align their society with an idealized, aristocratic past and establish a sense of continuity with long-standing traditions. However, this desire for self-representation was inherently paradoxical. While these homes celebrated democratic Greco-Roman motifs and embodied Southern values of honor and hospitality, they were also monuments built and sustained by the brutal practice of slavery, a reality antithetical to the egalitarian principles of the very antiquity they sought to emulate. Thus, Greek Revival architecture exemplifies the profound contradiction between the proclaimed virtues and the harsh societal realities of the antebellum South. Benjamin Shields Sr., the man who built Verdura, remains a somewhat enigmatic figure. This is the only known photograph of him to exist. Born in North Carolina in 1786, he later moved to Florida, a path typical of the many land speculators and planters from Georgia and the Carolinas who flooded into Leon County in the 1830s. By the 1820s, he had already established himself as a founding planner of Jacksonville. Often called one of Florida's first millionaires, this specific claim is difficult to verify due to a lack of surviving bank records, though he was undoubtedly one of the state's wealthiest individuals. His fortune was built on vast landholdings, encompassing 10,000 acres in Leon County alone and approximately 45,000 acres across the state. A key to his wealth was his brick manufacturing business, which was based on slave labor. The bricks used to build Verdura itself were made by the enslaved on site. He was instrumental in creating the Central Bank of Florida, the Union Bank of Tallahassee, and the Merchants and Planters Bank of Magnolia. It is impossible to discuss Benjamin Shears's wealth and the operation of Verdura without centering the institution of slavery, as every facet of his money-making enterprises was tied to it in some way. His numerous land deals often included enslaved people as part of the transaction, and his substantial income was generated by their forced labor. This was not limited to agriculture. He had enslaved individuals manufacturing bricks in his kilns, and he both rented out and provided enslaved labor to work on the railroad and construct local roads. Furthermore, the financial institutions he relied upon were themselves built on the capital of other slave-owning planters. Verdura was a working cotton plantation, and while the precise number of enslaved people there at any given time is difficult to pin down, records show Shears generally owned between 1 and 200 across his various holdings, a staggering number that placed him among the elite, as most Leon County plantations held only 30 to 45 enslaved individuals. Many of these individuals were used for agriculture, but others were highly skilled blacksmiths, brickmakers, and carpenters who built the house itself, cleared land, and cut timber. It is crucial to remember that while Verdura was a magnificent physical structure, it was built by both the physical labor of the enslaved and financed entirely by the profits created through their exploitation in the broader slave trade. Benjamin Shears did not get to enjoy his grand estate for long, dying of yellow fever in 1838 at the age of 52. Praised in his obituary as one of the wealthiest and most efficient capitalists in the state, he became the first person laid to rest in the family cemetery he had established on the property. This diagram, from Sharyn Heiland Shields' archaeological work, maps the cemetery's layout, and the large urn pictured here serves as the marker for his grave. So, what happened after Shears's death? He left behind a brand new mansion and an empire of excessive land and wealth, yet within decades, Verdura lay in ruins. This dramatic fall was not a simple stroke of bad luck but the direct result of the very foundations upon which his fortune was built. As Sharyn Heiland Shields astutely observed, the ruins of Benjamin Shears's plantation house have come to symbolize the excess that was the Cotton Kingdom and the original sin of slavery that eventually destroyed it. His death triggered the immense challenge of dividing such a vast, debt-laden estate. The economic instability that followed the Civil War stripped the remaining assets of their value. The family was ultimately unable to maintain the grand estate, and a devastating fire in the 1880s consumed the vacant house, leaving only the haunting columns as a monument to the unsustainable excess and profound moral contradictions of the system it represented. After Benjamin Shears's death, his vast estate was divided among his 9 surviving children. Much of this division was handled through private, unrecorded transactions, making the full dispersal of his properties difficult to trace. Following the death of the eldest son, Joseph, the remaining heirs petitioned the courts in the 1870s to appoint a new executor to distribute what remained. Specific plantations were allotted to individual children. Daughter Sarah Jane received land adjoining Southwood Plantation, which merged with it upon her marriage to its owner. Benjamin Jr. purchased the Fauntleroy Plantation at auction to settle its debt. Charles Powell inherited Ever May, and Thomas Butler received Tigertail. Verdura itself passed to Benjamin's wife, Sarah, and upon her death, was divided among the heirs. By 1858, as the Civil War loomed, ownership was consolidated with the youngest sons, Charles Powell and Thomas Butler, with Charles eventually becoming the sole owner. After the Civil War, Verdura, once a highly prosperous plantation, became an economic burden. Even before the war, in 1858, the owners had tried unsuccessfully to sell it. The post-war Southern economy collapsed, with devastated infrastructure and markets making cash crops like cotton far less profitable. The end of slavery forced a shift to sharecropping, which often trapped laborers in debt and provided unreliable income for landowners. These cumulative disruptions rendered large estates like Verdura economically unviable. For Charles Powell, the sole owner, the home of his once wealthy father had become a costly liability, and his troubles were only beginning. Meanwhile, as Verdura became a financial burden, Charles Powell Shares was living at his other plantation, Ever May, near his older brother Benjamin's estate, Fauntleroy. The situation grew intensely personal when Charles discovered his wife, Martha, was having an affair with his nephew, Benjamin Cadwallader Shares, and had become pregnant. Charles forced her to give the child to an orphanage in New Orleans. The scandal erupted publicly during adultery charges for their divorce, where Martha's story fell apart as she could not explain the abandoned child. The family strife escalated to extreme violence when Charles and his nephew engaged in a shootout on Monroe Street, resulting in Ben being shot in the hip. Both men were arrested, Charles for attempted murder, though the charges were ultimately dropped, revealing a family torn apart by betrayal and violence. The saga of Verdura reached its end amidst a whirlwind of scandal and financial ruin. Charles Powell Shares died in 1881 at the St. Mark's Lighthouse under uncertain circumstances, rumored to be yellow fever, but without confirmation, before a judge could finalize his divorce. Though he had disinherited his wife, Martha, the lack of proven adultery allowed her to successfully sue for a portion of his heavily mortgaged estate, including both Verdura and Ever May. The costly legal battle further drained the insolvent plantation's resources. Shortly after, the main house at Verdura was destroyed by fire, likely around 1885, though family accounts and vague newspaper reports conflict on the exact date and cause, with theories ranging from lightning to accidental burning or even intentional arson. With the estate bankrupt, the land was ultimately sold off by the banks and Martha, and today Verdura is owned by the St. Joe Paper Company. The history of Verdura is a microcosm of the rise and fall of the Cotton Kingdom itself. The land was purchased in 1826 at the peak of antebellum expansion, and its grand house was built as a monument to Benjamin Shares' wealth, a wealth that died with him in 1838. The end of the Civil War in 1865 shattered the economic system of enslaved labor that had sustained such plantations, and the final blow came when Verdura itself burned to the ground in 1895. Plantations like Verdura are relics of a world that faced extinction. Their crumbling ruins stand as powerful symbols of the dramatic transition from Southern dominance to the irreversible end of that way of life. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of Verdura Plantation. From its grand beginnings as a symbol of antebellum ambition to its eventual decay into ruins, the story of Verdura is a powerful and poignant chapter in Florida's history. It serves as a solemn reminder of the complex legacies woven into our landscape, of wealth built on exploitation, of grand dreams cut short by tragedy and time, and of the enduring importance of remembering all aspects of our past. This presentation, and the preservation of Verdura's memory, would not have been possible without the dedicated work of Sharyn Heiland Shields, to whom we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude. Thank you for watching. For comprehensive information regarding historic properties in Tallahassee, contacting the Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation is highly recommended. They can be reached by phone at 850-488-7334 or via email at office@talltrust.org. Their office is located at the historic James T. Perkins House, 423 East Virginia Street, Tallahassee, Florida, 32301.